Joining me now is Elizabeth Goitian. She's a senior director of the Liberty and National Security Program at the Brennan Center for Justice. Elizabeth is a nationally recognized expert on presidential emergency powers, government surveillance, and government secrecy. Elizabeth, good morning to you. Thank you for being with us.
Thanks so much for having me.
This is, there are times when this idea of government surveillance is sort of more prominent than it is in other times. But this is a strange bill, and the Section 702, which has just year after year become more dangerous. There were a lot of Republicans who wanted more assurances. Mike Johnson seemed to offer them some of them and got the votes that were necessary. But you're calling the whole thing fool's gold.
Absolutely. The bill that Mike Johnson put in front of Congress created no limits on these backdoor searches that we've been talking about, which is these searches that allow the government to have warrantless access to Americans' communications, these communications that are incidentally collected through Section 702 surveillance. And so his bill would not have changed the standard for conducting these searches. It wouldn't have changed the procedures for conducting these searches. It basically had a few tweaks here and there that addressed other things unrelated to backdoor searches, and then a couple of, an audit of backdoor searches that actually duplicates an audit that's already being conducted, and things like that really made no change to the law. So this was a straight authorization dressed up as reform, but it still wouldn't have passed. There were enough members in the House Freedom Caucus, that's the libertarian right in the House, that were against this and that saw that this wasn't real reform. The only way that Speaker Johnson was able to get them to vote for it was to promise them something else that they wanted that's unrelated to Section 702, and that's a ban on central bank digital currency, totally different issue.
Right.
And so Speaker Johnson put that in there to get their votes, knowing that the Senate wouldn't pass it because the majority leader in the Senate had said there's no way we're going to pass this central bank digital currency ban. So Johnson sent a bill to the Senate knowing it would never pass and never become law because he needed the appearance of a win in the House. And so now we're in another short-term extension. We're back to the drawing board. And unless Speaker Johnson is willing to allow votes on real reform, we're going to continue in this cycle, it would seem.
But this is a bit like immigration reform, right? It has been mishandled by administrations of both parties, by Congresses of both parties. It is interesting in that the opposition to the FISA court and the surveillance system has got supporters on the left and the right and a lot of libertarians. And yet this FISA program has existed and been renewed under multiple administrations. What keeps you up about the dangers of this expanding surveillance system?
Well, you talked about some of the abuses and the fact that these backdoor searches have been targeted at members of Congress, political protesters from across the ideological spectrum, journalists, congressional campaign donors, and much, much more. I mean, there were pervasive and widespread abuses that were happening over the last few years. And that's in the words of the FISA court, these pervasive and widespread abuses. I worry that those abuses were the tip of the iceberg, certainly in terms of what we could be seeing now. And one of the reasons that I'm worried about that is because this administration has gutted the internal oversight mechanisms that are supposed to ferret out and report abuses. It has Kash Patel dismantled an office in the FBI that was set up precisely to try to ensure compliance with the rules for Section 702. The president fired 3 members of the Privacy and Civil Liberties Oversight Board, leaving only 1 member left, which isn't a quorum. And, the inspectors general have been fired without cause or otherwise essentially intimidated into inaction. And so this is a system that has always relied extensively on self-policing by the executive branch instead of judicial approval of these searches. That's never a good idea. It's always a situation in which abuses can happen and do happen. But that danger is so much greater now that these oversight mechanisms just simply aren't functioning the way they're supposed to.
So part of the thing is that when the FISA court was established, there was a sense that this is about terrorists, and incidentally, they might get some information about Americans while they're eavesdropping on terrorists. It's an interesting abstraction, because what we are realizing now is that all sorts of people are getting information gathered on them, but they don't know it. This is why this is a hard topic to gain traction, because a whole lot of people don't know they're being surveilled, and they don't know what that might do to them because they don't think they're doing anything wrong.
Right. And I think it's important to point out that even though the general goal of the program when it was enacted was to go after suspected foreign terrorists, the law itself does not require that the foreign target be suspected of any wrongdoing whatsoever. And so the conversations between foreign targets and Americans can include entirely innocent conversations between Americans and their friends and colleagues and relatives overseas. I'll give you an example. If a British journalist is speaking with members of the British government, those communications might include what the law defines as foreign intelligence. And so that British journalist could be a target under Section 702. And that means that conversations with American journalists that person works with, or again, friends, family members in the United States, their communications with the journalist could also be collected and then subject to warrantless searches.
Elizabeth, thanks. This is a complex issue, and we appreciate you being here to help us analyze it. Elizabeth Goitian is the Senior Director of the Brennan Center's Liberty and National Security Program.